In my last recording, I talked about the planets, and I explained in a kind of longish recording a whole bunch of planets. I apologize if the video was very long. It is mainly because there are so many planets that I was talking about in there, and it wasn't just the basic ones. You can actually read some really deep stuff about love, about ambition, about talent in your planets, if you know which ones to read. So we went over some of those in the last recording. In this recording, I'm going to talk about the signs, and if there's time, then I'll talk about the houses. The signs are what we traditionally hear of in folk astrology. So in the horoscopes, you'll hear about signs like Sagittarius or Scorpio or Libra or Virgo or something like that. The signs are basically divisions of space. Well, they're supposed to be, at least. Before I tell you what each of the signs mean, let me just tell you that there are two systems that you can use in astrology. You can use the tropical system or the sidereal system. So basically in the summer, when the side of the earth is most exposed to, I guess, the optimum shower of rays from the sun in your hemisphere, I guess we'll say that's what the summer is defined as, the sun tends to be around here in Cancer and in Leo. So basically the summer is somewhere around here, and then the fall is around here, and then winter is around here, and the spring is around here. What does that mean? It basically means that in the universal sky, with respect to the earth and its seasons, the sun can take up residence in different divisions of the sky if you're in the tropical system. But if you're in the sidereal system, we don't divide the sky according to the sun's, according to the earth's seasons. Instead, we're like, forget the earth seasons, let's just look at where the actual stars are. Because there are real constellations. There's a real constellation out there called Aries. There's a real constellation called Taurus, or Gemini, or Cancer. The problem is that as the sun makes its way, well, not just the sun, but as our solar system makes its way around the galaxy, and the earth and the sun and the moon, they all change their tilt over the course of thousands and thousands of years. That array of stars that actually constitutes the background here shifts. So, for example, most of the stars in the constellation Aries are actually not Aries. Right now, in the year 2017, most of the stars of tropical system Aries are actually the stars of Pisces. And everything is rolled backwards by about 23, 24, 25 degrees, depending on when you're looking at birth charts. So the point is that you have to take this whole wheel and roll it backwards by about 24 degrees, and that's going to tell you where the actual constellations are. If you're looking at the actual constellations and then you decide to divide them into 30-degree units, you'll get something called the sidereal system. The sidereal system is often used in the Vedic and Indian astrology traditions, but in the West, we use the tropical traditions. Now, I know what you're thinking. Doesn't that make one of them wrong? Kind of, but kind of not. What happens when you have the stars shift their signs in different systems is that you basically have the way things appear and the way things are. The best analogy I can give is the definition of a hero, for example. If you go back 2,000 years, maybe a hero was actually an Aries-style hero. He was he was a badass. He slayed enemy armies and things like that. And that's where Aries was actually Aries. What about our heroes today? Our heroes today are more like actors. They're more like sports stars. They propagate the illusions of the public. And so basically, today's Aries comes in the field of yesterday's Pisces. We still call it Aries, though, and it's okay. So it's not that the two systems are actually incompatible or that one makes the other wrong. It's more like the standards of what all of this stuff was comes to be represented by what all of this stuff used to be. It's pretty deep when you think about it. Now, why do we need to know that? Well, we need to know that for several reasons, but I guess they're not immediate to your reading of the chart. You should know, however, that when you're reading signs, that you're actually reading patterns of action, and you're not reading absolute characters. You're reading patterns of characters compared to other characters. So Aries isn't always heroic, but Aries may be more spontaneous by comparison to everything else. Taurus may be more body-centric in comparison to everything else. Capricorn may be more business or more stern or more structuring in comparison to everything else. And so that relative nature is a big part of it. Oh, by the way, if you hear people talking about Ophiucus, like, where's Ophiucus? We discovered a new constellation. No, we didn't. There are lots of other constellations which are squeezed in here, like, Canis Major and what's his face? What's it called? Pegasus and Ophiucus. Those are actual constellations whose stars are somewhere around here. But it doesn't change the nature of the signs. You don't need to put Ophiucus in your astrology chart. Ophiucus has always been there. It's just that NASA has acknowledged something a little bit more immediate about Ophiucus, but they're not using tropical anyway. Okay, let's talk about the signs and what each of them mean. So these are the signs. This is Aries, and they go, by the way, counterclockwise in order. Aries is considered first, and then Taurus, and then Gemini, and then Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. They're all divided into 30-degree sections, even though the constellations themselves don't go like that. It doesn't matter. This is more of a mathematical thing than it is a constellar thing. But what you should note is that the astral wheel is basically divided into 3 sections: self, other, and world. The first 4 signs, Aries through Cancer, are all about the self, what you feel within. The next 4 signs are all about others, how you deal one-to-one with others or with things right in front of you. And the last 4 are all about the world, how you deal with the abstract world that can see you but doesn't really interact with you, the faceless public. Aries tends to be spontaneous. By the way, I didn't put the element classifications in there, but they also tend to follow in order. The order is fire, earth, air, water. Fire, earth, air, water. Fire, earth, air, water. And what does that mean? All the fire signs tend to burst out and do brand new things. So at the beginning of the self group, you've got spontaneous action. At the beginning of the other group, you've got spontaneous showing. That's the youthful Leo. At the beginning of the world group, you've got a spontaneous public image, and that's Jupiter. That's Sagittarius. The planet associated with it is Jupiter. And so those are the characteristics of the different divisions of the chart. Really, what we've done is divide a plain old geometric unit circle into 12 divisions, which, by the way, is trigonometrically significant, and that's one of the reasons why 12 works. It has to do with sines and cosines and tangents and 60-degree angles and 30-degree angles and all that other stuff, which work very smoothly in trig. So if you're wondering what the deal is with this 12, why isn't it 13, why isn't it 27, it could be 13, it could be 27, but mathematically 12 is better. So anyway, Aries is spontaneous. It comes out and it does things. Stuff that is in Aries tends to have more of a, hey, I feel like doing that quality. Taurus is more bodily feeling. The idea is that once you've exhausted all of your spontaneous action, you're like, oh, okay, I'm done doing that. Whew, how does everything feel? That gets you into Taurus. So now you're valuing things, you're measuring things, you're comparing the worth of stuff. Planets in Taurus tend to compare the worth of things in terms of one's personal identity. Once you're done comparing the worth of things, you tend to talk about it. And so Taurus doesn't really talk that much by itself. It's more processing the value of stuff. Once that processing is over, we move over to Gemini. Gemini is about communication, but you notice it's in the self group. So Gemini is communication that comes from you. And I like to call it opinionation, because when a Gemini speaks, a Gemini is basically telling you what's on their mind. This is different from a Libra. When a Libra speaks, it's communicating with you in conversation. Gemini is talking at you, Libra is talking with you. And Aquarius is talking around you, or is having talk around you. That's what all the air signs do. They talk, they communicate. Once all the talk is done, and all of the feeling is done, and all of the spontaneous action is done, then the person sits there and says, well, what's left undone? And this is your inclination towards the next action. Cancer wants to take its internal feeling and put it out there to the rest of the world. So it can be sensitive, it can be nurturing, it has to do with taking care of people and emotionality. It can be mothering, but it can also be very bullying, because not all Cancer sentiments are smooth and friendly. Some Cancer sentiments are angry. But if they're angry, they're in the self world. So they're going to bottle that anger in more often than some of the other signs, and it comes off as frustration or bullying. Planets in Cancer tend to be more inclined to have an internal emotional discontent than other signs. Once you bring that inner want out into the world of others, we get into the other section here. Then we start showing ourselves off, and that's Leo. It has to do with charisma and attention getting. It can be prideful, it can be arrogant, but it can also be youthful. And the more you study it, the more it tends to be pretty youthful. Leo is associated with the sun, by the way. Then you've got Virgo. Once we're done hogging the spotlight, doing our attention thing, then we go forth and we start studying things. We start doing the analytical, meaning-making stuff. It's like, oh, I'm not the only person on this stage. Let me go see what this other individual wants. And so we start putting ideas together. We take care of our health, and we tend to be logical. We're trying to make ideas work together. Leo didn't do that. Leo was about putting itself out there. That's not bad or good. It's just that Leo isn't immediately concerned with the worth of other things. None of these signs are until you get to Virgo. Virgo starts comparing the worth of other things, but it doesn't tell you what it found. It doesn't share the communication. So once the worth has been determined, we move on to Libra, and Libra starts communicating with you. Libra, in addition to being one-to-one communication, your style of talking to other people is also your style of talking to anything. Talking to video games, talking to musical instruments. Why? Well, that's because Libra is sociable and exchanges ideas with anything, not just people. So your talk doesn't have to be just the sounds that come out of your mouth. It could be the movement of your fingers across the piano. And in that sense, Libra is how you communicate in general. Well, let me take that back. Planets that are in Libra tend to be more communicative. And so they're going to be associated with how you interface with things one-on-one. Now, you've shown yourself as a Leo. You've made meaning. You've communicated nicely. Once all that's done, somehow you're still hanging around this other person or this other thing, and you've done everything you can, but then there's stuff that still is left undone. So Scorpio is where you start saying, all right, man, I did all my communication. Now I just want you to bend to my will, because we've tried everything else. And so just like Cancer, Scorpios are emotional. Unlike Cancer, Scorpios are emotional aimed at other people. So whereas a Cancer will get frustrated or might be pushy to you, a Scorpio tends to be more manipulative. And that's because I've got my internal feelings to impose action upon you. Scorpio is not always manipulative. It's associated with sex and death and the occult, much like House 8, and I'll talk about that later. But Scorpio really is designed to take things outside of you and make them do what you want. Higher versions of Scorpio are associated with reason and logic, because that would be taking ideas outside of you and making them do what you want. Then you've got Sagittarius. Once we've made the individual bend to our will, we're done with them and we go out into the public. We go out into the public and we make an appearance among those foreigners. They look at us, they form conclusions, We are in the faceless world, and because we're in the faceless world, we have a public reputation, and we're basically expanding. Right now, we're just performing action. So Sagittarius is performing action in a world of strangers, and that's it. You're seen. That's cool. I mean, there seems to be no price for this. There is a price for it, but that's a deeper discussion. But once it's done, once you're done promoting yourself in the world, you move into the realm of the limits that the world imposes, and they start labeling you. They say he's a jerk, or they say he's a boss, or they say that she's very stern, or something like that. Capricorn basically structures your public face. Capricorn is known to be stern, but I found two things about Capricorn which are interesting. It's not always stern. In fact, that sternness is more like the sternness of an architect. Yeah, she's designing buildings, but those buildings are meant to house people's emotions and people's inclinations inside. The structure is built to preserve the inner emotionality. And so there's a soft inner core behind Capricorn. And also, Capricorns tend to be funny in some way. There's a kind of two-sidedness to it, because you can't be stern all the time. And so you find that when you have planets in Capricorn, it's easier for you to be funny with those planets where you're inclined to be serious, but it's not the occasion for seriousness. So that's the basis of some really good comedy, when somebody is trying to be serious and the occasion doesn't allow for it. And unless you're some kind of undertaker or something, then you're not going to be surrounded by death all the time. After Capricorn, we move on to Aquarius. And so this is the information processing in the world. It's associated with computers and data and machines and anything that is described by a whole bunch of information that we don't really have time to process individually. So we just kind of process it in the abstract. It surrounds us and we deal with it. And that's Aquarius. If you've got stuff in Aquarius, those planets, those asteroids, tend to be activated when there is a lot of information around. Then Aquarius is also associated with things that stand out, gossipable things, humanitarian action, and weirdness. Why? Because all of those tend to get talked about by bigger groups around you. That's why. Anything that stands out and allows itself to be information-based basically can be described by Aquarius. Lastly, you've got Pisces. Pisces is known to be sensitive and emotional, and that's because Pisces is the sign where we pick up the emotions of the room around us. And so this is the sign that gives things a kind of vibe, for lack of a better word. Planets that are in Pisces tend to absorb the mood around you or affect the mood of the room around you. And so you have to be careful not to surround yourself with bad influences, because it will totally contaminate planets which are in that sign. Okay, signs basically describe the character of the planets in them or the houses that they fall on. And so when you read them, you're essentially looking at the color of whatever is in there. So in the previous recording, I talked about, for example, these planets. What happens when you've got these planets in these signs? Well, let's see. Just to kind of give a sample reading, this individual here has Mars in Virgo. Mars, if we recall, let's go back here, was steering others, exercising influence over others. So how does this individual exercise influence over others? Well, it does it in a Virgo way. And what does Virgo say? Analytical. So this individual exercises influence over others in the realm of analysis. So it's trying to find common ground, and its way of finding common ground is how it influences whatever interacts with it. I say it, I say them. I'm trying to keep the anonymity of this individual here. Let's look for something else. How about the moon? The moon is always important to read. The moon represents emotions, and Scorpio represents steering others. So apparently, this individual is emotionally content when they are able to successfully steer others in order to basically align with their will. How about Selene? Well, Selene was blessed talent, and it looks here like Selene is in Leo. Leo is charismatic and youthful, so apparently this individual has a blessed talent that takes on the character of charisma or youth. We can also see that it's got this passionate action here, which is the same way. It displays, whoops, that's going to be the next thing. It displays its passion in the form of charisma, or it is driven to passion. This individual is driven to passion when charisma is an opportunity for it to show itself. Okay, so you can read any of these planets and any of these signs together to kind of get the basic character of all these things. If you wanted to know, for example, how you talk to people, or you wanted to know more about how you talk to people, what would you look at? You probably look at Venus. Venus is one-to-one communication. This individual has Venus in Aquarius, and so it tends to talk to people in a kind of group way, or in a group setting, or it tends to reference mass information around it in order to help them communicate with you one-on-one. And of course, knowing this individual, I can tell you that that's true. Shouldn't be surprising because it's all based on stats anyway, but that's what you would do. Now, let me just add one more thing as long as we're looking at this. If you look up here, you see a minus in a Mercury sign, and it's opposite Mercury. I don't talk about that in Astrology 101, but this is an anti-planet. Mercury is somewhere in here, and it tells you your common ground. This individual finds common ground in projecting their image in the world. Right next to their ambition, by the way, that's Chariclo. But opposite building common ground is a thing that enables your social mobility, and that's anti-Mercury. I described this in the third book, All 144 Aspects, but the point is that for each of these planets that we talked about, you can also read anti-planets, and you can also read their signs and their meanings and everything else. So that's kind of cool, because really, if you wanted to know how this individual was able to advance in the world, advance their meaning-making and problem-solving capabilities, you might start with the sign of the anti-planet of meaning-making. But that's another story.